The most dangerous enemy you can have is the one that you don't know you have. The most dangerous weapon you can ever face is the one that you don't know your enemy has. This guy is a wolf in sheep's clothing. This has not made the MSM. Nobody's talking about this. But it's probably the most important development in Latin America in the last 10 years. Pedro Pablo Kuczynski was probably the only real ally the U.S. had left down there. This is his vice president, and while it's widely being reported that this guy is just going to mark time march and just step in and not really cause any waves, nothing could be further from the truth. This guy traces his political life back to the heart of the Shining Path terrorist organization. He has been part of that corruption for a long time. And in today's video, I'm going to walk you through this. Now, what you need to know from this is that he was the governor of the Moquegua department. This is a region in southern Peru that gave rise to the Shining Path. This is where he was from. His father was also the mayor of the region. Okay, this is where he got his start in politics. Okay, father, mayor of Moquegua, member of the APRA, that's critical. Studied at IEP Juan 13th at the GUE Simon Bolivar in Moquegua. Okay, anybody who knows what the Bolivarian movement is will be able to put those pieces together. Okay. Began in his home political ambitions, home region of Moquegua, ran under the APRA party. Most important thing that I'm going to take away from this part of this is when he became president. There were protests stating that at this point they wanted to remove all politicians. This is the part that colors the region politically and socially that is very, very hard to communicate to Americans, North Americans. Down there, they are completely fed up with political corruption way more than we are. They're ready to shit can everybody. And down there, they make political change by killing people. They don't do things down there like we do it up here. We want to sometimes, but we don't act. These people act. Even Rex Tillerson encouraged the military coup in Venezuela to overthrow Maduro. Torrijos in Panama, the guy that Carter signed the treaty with, took power in a coup. This is how they do things down there. Now, APRA, the party. Okay, this is who the current president, Vizcarra, of Peru, is associated with. Okay, these are Bolivarian revolutionaries. Okay, they're calling this guy pro-business conservative, but he's not. In fact, he has completely revamped the cabinet in Peru in his first 2 weeks, and one of the guys we're going to cover that he put in is one of the most corrupt guys in the military ever. Okay, APRA initially espoused anti-imperialism, pan-Americanism, international solidarity, and economic nationalism. This is right in line with Maduro and the guy getting ready to take power in Mexico, Obrador, and Ortega in Nicaragua. They're not reporting this, but this is an incredibly dangerous development in Peru when we have a leader slated to travel there. Now, Moquegua, where they come from. One of the issues, one of the big issues, who remembers the wind talkers from World War II? Remember when we had Native Americans that we were using for communications? There was no way, nobody knew the language except for them. And they could communicate freely, and it helped us win World War II. These guys down there have their version of wind talkers. They have languages down there in this region that nobody knows other than these people. We covered this in another video when we talked about State of Grace. This was Peril in Peru from Ellen Berman. And it says down here, Latin America represents an important region for Islamic radicalism because the conditions enable the free, almost undetectable movement of their members throughout the region. This is what I'm talking about. Even if we had intelligence assets down there, they wouldn't be able to detect these guys because they can communicate freely because nobody speaks their language. This is what makes this region so dangerous. Now, sorry about that, 1 second. There we go. Okay, this is a book called A Companion to Latin American History, talking about the Moquegua region, talking about the Tiwanaku and the Wari tribes in that region, but it just gives you the location that this is in fact the heartland of the Shining Path, Sendero Luminoso, guerrilla movement in the 80s and 90s. They are still operating. Peru loves to tell you that they've defeated them and that they've jailed their leader, but they are still operating and they are still a force to be reckoned with. Even Kaczynski, when he appointed his Minister of Defense, he tasked him with defeating this group that allegedly had already been defeated. Now, this is where the root, the very beginnings of the Shining Path go back to the 1890s. Okay, this guy named Mariátegui. He was born in Moquegua. Okay, one of the greatest Marxists ever. This guy, Guzman, their leader, they actually called him a greater leader than Mao and Stalin. They even had a thing called Guzmanism as opposed to Maoism. That's how serious these people are about this guy. Okay, and this is talks about Peruvian socialism. And this is a blog talking about the Shining Path. 1991, the Shining Path had carved themselves out a defendable territory inside of which the government had no access. The elected politicians in those areas long since murdered, Guzman now saw himself as an equal to Marx, and Guzmanism was revered more than Marxism and Maoism. Okay, these weren't just some random group of kids walking around like MS-13 is. These guys are for real. These guys, and I'm not saying MS-13 isn't dangerous, I'm just saying that this group of people are a lot more organized, they're a lot more well-funded, and they're much harder to track and much harder to deal with. This guy, Vizcarra, just named this dude, this Huerta Torres, as his new Minister of Defense. This guy was the chief of staff of what they call Huaga Front. The Huaga Front was one of the most corrupt military organizations in Peru. Sorry about this, I'm just having an issue with the tabs here. They were in the pockets of the drug traffickers that were supporting the Shining Path. And the guy that Kaczynski had in charge was actually making some headway into getting rid of the Shining Path, and all of a sudden Kaczynski resigns. This guy takes over, and then he changes the defense minister. I mean, the corruption of that group is like, they're the worst. The Huaga Police Front, and now their leader is now the Minister of Defense in Peru. I'm telling you, and I know you guys have heard me just yammer on about this, but if there can be any good done in having a YouTube channel that talks about these issues, if someone would hear this and someone would get this to the ear of someone who could make a change, or at least have this on the radar and prevent a tragedy. I mean, look, I don't agree with the guy. I don't agree with his policies. I think he's a fake. He's a fraud. But we don't fix our problems with violence. All it does is take your enemy and elevate them to God status. Just like with Kennedy. You know, Kennedy was a man, and yes, he had some good ideas, but he also had some very bad ones. And, you know, he had flaws, but after he, you know, was assassinated, he became this god figure for the Democrats. And we don't need that. We need to win in the arena of ideas. And this guy, the newly minted president of Peru, is incredibly dangerous and has ties to terrorist organizations. A very nasty one called the Shining Path. So that's what I wanted to make the video about today, to show you what's really going on, to show you the news that nobody's talking about and what they won't talk about. I hope U.S. intelligence is paying attention to this. Like, share, subscribe.